Good afternoon, everyone. A warm welcome to each and every one of you to this first annual IRMI conference. At the outset, I would like to extend a warm invitation to the panelists who will be walking us through the next couple of hours. And I'm really looking forward to a very engaging session with all the participants in the next 4 days. At the outset, I would like to thank our funders, Department of Biotechnology and Wellcome Trust, for really helping us build this initiative called IRMI. The next couple of minutes, I want to just walk you through what IRMI is all about, and how did it start, and what are the nuances of this initiative, and also share with you the list of the first round of awardees. If you could have the next slide, please. Yeah, so the purpose of IRMI was started off following a lot of conversations that happened, and we're very fortunate to have Dr. Shaid Jamil, the former CEO of India Airlines, will be walking you through later during the day in terms of the history and the genesis of IRMI. Just for the sake of simplicity, I would really like to draw your attention to 4 main purposes of why this Indian Research Management Initiative was started way back in February 2018. So prior to the February 2018, there was a pilot phase run by Savita Iyer, who is the coordinator, along with Shahid, and they reached out to institutional heads across the country, spoke to funding bodies, stakeholders within India and outside to really bring in the best practices in terms of research management. So following this deliberation and discussion across the ecosystem, the 4 cardinal pillars were, first of all, we need to build a capacity of research managers in India. Second thing is, in this process, can we build a community of research managers who will really go about establishing the professional network as well as building the best practices that are used globally within our Indian academic institutions. And the third point was to create awareness and also to elicit a response from the community in terms of the need and the value of research management within India. And the tangible outcome or the benefit of this whole thing is to improve the competitiveness of Indian researchers and research institutions in the global arena. So these were the 4 major opportunities in terms of why the IRMI was set out. If you could have the next slide, please. So before the IRMI launch, the official launch in February 2018, there was a 12-month pilot program, as I mentioned earlier, wherein the idea was to go and reach out to the institutional heads, talk to the stakeholders in the ecosystem to clearly understand what does research management mean. Because research management is not only about grants management, it's much more beyond that. Managing the entire project life cycle or research life cycle, which goes all the way from writing good proposals, identifying opportunities, both nationally as well as internationally, and really putting in a very cohesive governance process around the entire application cycle, building into the regulatory and legal requirements. So this awareness session gave a lot of inputs, and then there was dialogue with the institutional heads, and then subsequently a baseline of information was obtained, which served as the pillar to really work on the future policy and funding opportunities. If could I have the next slide, please? So this led to a position paper authored by Savita Iyer and Shaid Jamil, which was published in the Wellcome Open Research, wherein the learnings from this pilot study was shared in the form of a publication with a lot of inputs from key stakeholders. Next slide, please. So what are the different formats of IRMI? For those of you who are attending this conference for the first time, I would probably spend a couple of minutes talking you to about the 3 flagship programs we have under the IRMI initiative. The first one is the IRMI Travel Grant. This basically helps to, this provides a platform for research managers to really build a national and international network. So what this travel grant enables is to give an amount of around 3 lakhs, which really helps in them traveling across national and international events to build capacity and networking. Next click, please. The second part of the IRMI is an IRMI Research Management Fellowship. This is basically a mentor fellowship program, which with the prospect of institutional strengthening program. So for which the institutions seeking to establish or expand the research office activities they get an award of up to 6 lakhs per annum for 3 years and 1 lakh for training. So what this fellowship entails is to really build the capacity within institutions which are going to start newly, as well as which are trying to build on and expand. And the third part is the IRMI RM grant, which is a research management grant. This provides an award of up to 10 lakhs a year for 1 year. It provides a unique opportunity to help embed professional research management support within institutions seeking to enhance their research. Good afternoon, Vijay. Next slide, please. So just to give you a timeline, so we open the call for competition in September, October each year. The application deadline we have over a month, and then it goes through a process, and by March, with like 6 months period, we declare the results, and we have a distinguished panel of committee members from India as well as abroad who really bring in a collective experience of over 100 years in terms of managing research management networks across the world. If you could have the next slide, please. Yeah, this is a quick list of the awardees from the first grant, which was released in 2020. As you could see here, these are the travel awardees. They're all eagerly waiting to travel to Hiroshima, Japan once the situation improves. The next slide, please. This talks about the research management fellowships. These are the recipients. We're very happy that they are spread across 2 cities and across 4 institutions. The next slide, please. Next slide, please. Yeah. So thank you so much. I just want to leave you here telling that we are very excited about this opportunity, the first conference, and we really look forward to deliberating, discussing, and really networking in the next 4 days, and really have focused discussions around what can each of the stakeholders in this ecosystem play a part. As funders, what is that we can do? As participants of research managers, what could you do? And as well as the institutional heads, what can they do to really make the IRMI initiative a big success in the coming years? So with that, thank you so much for your patient listening. So good afternoon and a warm welcome to Dr. VijayRaghavan, Dr. Simon K. So without further ado, if you could just start off our main event, what we are eagerly looking forward to. It's indeed an honor and privilege for me to introduce Professor VijayRaghavan. He is truly a scientific visionary and emeritus professor in the field of developmental genetics. Since March 2018, he has been donning the role of the principal scientific advisor to the government of India, a very, very powerful role. And his office has been providing strategic guidance to identify challenges across science and technology, and also help in formulating timely interventions and developing a futuristic roadmap and advice to the Prime Minister of India and his cabinet. And Vijay has been at the forefront to champion the application of science and technology in identifying critical infrastructural gaps, driving innovation and technology delivery towards solving socio-economic challenges for sustainable growth, and fostering effective public-private linkages for driving research and innovation. And his role is much more prominent and very visible with the pandemic, what we're going through, and his office has been at the center of all the initiatives that we're seeing across the country. Vijay previously served as the Secretary, Department of Biotechnology, Government of India, and he was one of the founding directors of the National Institute of Biological Sciences, Bangalore. Vijay has won several awards, both nationally and internationally, and he is an elected fellow of the Royal Society and also an associate of the US National Academy of Sciences. And in 2013, he was conferred the prestigious Padma Shri Award by the President of India. Thank you so much, Vijay, for taking time to be a part of this initiative. And you are one of the founding fathers of the India Alliance. So we're very happy to have you to participate in today's event. What we would like from you is, my request is, it'd be really invaluable for our participants to hear from you about your thoughts on the draft Science, Technology and Innovation Policy 2020, which you are really being the chief architect, and also how the institutional research managers can play an enabling role in building international partnerships, as well as how can they really work towards accessing extramural funding, and also bringing in some of the best global practices in research governance and management. So we really look forward to hearing from you, Vijay. Over to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Vasan, and it's good to see Simon here and everyone else. This is always a pleasure to interact with the India Alliance. It's one of the stars on our firmament and something which all of us here are very proud of, and an example of both good management internally, its reach, and its international collaboration. This is absolutely terrific. One of the aspects of doing science in India is that it's very different from what the approach to science is in many other countries. You can look at the UK, the Scandinavian countries, the US, Japan, and so on. And these are countries where many of the people here would have gone and spent some time as graduate students or postdocs or visitors and so on. And when we go there and we come back, we want our systems and processes and the extent of resources available and the ability of functioning to be similar. And there is, of course, great sense and value in that aspiration. And in that, those kinds of aspirations, models such as our best institutions, our best scientists, our best research structures, all play an important role. But that is the fundamental difference and a challenge in a place like India. And that is, the question, if we were to ask, if you as a scientist, or you as the alliance, or you as an institution, if you were to be transported to another planet, to Mars, would the country notice? And if the country doesn't notice, we have a problem. And if it notices the absence and bemoans it, then we're doing okay. By that measure, it is absolutely clear that the alliance has done really well. If we didn't have the alliance, the country would notice. But that was not the case in the early days of the alliance. There was a great concern that it would be a structure which supports elite science and facilitates science for the elite, but has little connection with reality. And I must congratulate the leadership of the alliance, first Dr. Anuradha Lohia and then Dr. Shaid Jamil, for grasping these nettles very firmly of linkages and taking the letter of the role of the alliance into a spirit and taking it forward into expanding the footprint. So the initial concern that by deciding that you will fund the best, you will fund only a narrow set of people was proven wrong, and the alliance has expanded its footprint enormously. So, and it's done it well, and people are doing well, and the metrics of their success are not only and importantly global science, but also what impact they're having locally. So the more broader biomedical research reach, the public health reach, coupled with the basic biology reach, is absolutely terrific. So here is a structure which has shown over a decade what value it can have, spanning the spectrum, both in terms of access and equity of opportunity without compromising excellence. Now, if you look at this now from the context of our institutions, our research institutions, our universities, and how enabling they are, then we have a particular kind of problem. And that problem is the following, which is the alliance has enabled individuals and institutions to connect to broader ecosystems and questions, despite institutional frailties. And it is therefore now time to examine within the broad number of institutions across our countries, given the same kind of difficult ecosystem we have some institutions fared better than others, and what can we learn from each other? Now, this is not a lesson which is easy to understand and emulate, because the variables which make for success are a combination of effort, circumstance, and just plain luck. And therefore, if some institution has not done as well as someone else, then to say that X or Y or Z is to blame would not be correct. But still, there are learning possibilities. What are the lessons which one can learn? The alliances efforts are, of course, important, but also the ability of institutions to work as an institution, as distinct from a collection of individuals to whom space and electricity and water is rented, and they are all on their own free situation, is an important cultural difference. And that is something which we need to start imbibing more and more. That is to have naturally occurring collaborations, both within institutions and outside. There's a fundamental need for research management to do two kinds of things. One, research management in terms of positioning the institute to apply for competitive grants and so on and so forth. But the problem with that approach alone, that's a very important approach, but the problem with that approach alone is that it addresses the available resources in the standard ecosystem, Department of Biotechnology, Science and Technology, ICMR, and so on and so forth. It doesn't access the enormous resources available in the social sector where research is very important. The problem with those resources is their access and their value is not measured by what you do as an individual or even as a group or what you publish, but what impact you have on that problem. Public health is a good example that we are just coming from a discussion on public health issues. And the issue is not about how beautiful your work is and where you can get it published, but how immediate an impact it can have. So therefore, in terms of research management, I would conclude this part by saying we need a mindset change. We need an internal mindset change in the metrics of our measurement within institutions, evaluating individuals and evaluating institutions so that they take on important, for example, in the case of the Alliance, public health problems and solve them, as opposed to saying, here is a very beautiful question which I can study, and I will therefore study this molecule by examining cancer of the Eppendorf tube. And I will get these 10 different kinds of papers coming out of that, and this will put me in a high ranking. That's not wrong, but if you want to be to serve the deletion test in a possible way, that is, if you're not there, will your impact be felt here, then you need to actually address local problems. So I would urge the research management system to not only look at how you can access grants for your institution and individuals there, but how you can access problems and solve them. Well, this has actually worked out relatively well during the pandemic for urgent reasons. It is extraordinary to see how our science agencies came together, how our institutions came together, and people doing anything from astronomy to topology came together to look at problems to solve, because there was an urgency to solve that. So that was good. Now, how can we keep that going? Now is the question. So I'll end now, I don't want to exceed my time, by saying that there are three different trains which move. The train of science moves slowly but steadily, carrying enormous loads and does really well, but it moves the slow train. The second train is the train of society, which wants results not in the years which science measures, but in terms of or decades which science measures, but in terms of a year or two. Society wants solutions to its problems in that period. And the third train is the one of politics, which wants results by the weekend. So these are the three different kinds of demands which our society puts in place. And we will lose the narrative if we try to address each demand instantly. But there must be drones flitting between each of these trains, carrying ideas and solutions and material, so that each of these trains can be satisfied with their purpose. There are many, many wonderful things going on if you take our ecosystem as a composite and ask what can be delivered immediately in terms of ideas, policies, regulatory changes, and so on. That requires one kind of drone with people in it who flit back between the slow train and the very fast train. Another kind of drone which fits to people's solutions. How does one solve problem? inside that slow train, inside our institutions, there can be great diversity. You can have a, in a biology institute, you can have a tabla player if you think that that's going to be valuable at some time. Authority shouldn't interfere at that level of detail, but that entire sphere or that train should be contributing to the other two. And that's why interfaces are important. Grant management and resource management people are critical in that, but they should also work with incubators, with industry and everyone else to keep flitting between these trains so that solutions which are demanded by society and by those who are elected are met, while we also look to the future and deal with innovation on a long term. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Vijay, for those wonderful insights around your thoughts about research management, the role the science can play, the society, and beautiful analogy of talking about these three trains. Really appreciate your time. Thank you so much. So now it's time to welcome, and it's my privilege and honor to welcome Dr. Simon Kay, our next speaker. So Simon is the head of international operations and partnerships science at the Wellcome Trust. He's served at Wellcome Trust since 2012. Simon has played a significant role in the Wellcome Trust capacity building initiatives across Africa and India. So his team at the Wellcome Trust works very closely with the Alliance for Accelerating Excellence in Science in Africa, AESA, the initiative, and also he's been a long-term partner with the DBT Wellcome Trust India Alliance. Simon is also a governor at Ardingly College in West Sussex. He is a trustee of the Malaria Consortium and the director of the Africa Health Research Initiative in South Africa. He is the director of the Africa Research Consortium for Health in Kenya and a member of the Partners Group, which provides governance oversight at ASAP. So Simon, if we could request you in your talk to really share your invaluable experiences to the benefit of the audience about why Wellcome Trust places such an important aspect on good governance of research at its institutions. And if you could share some insights from your learnings from Africa, that will really help us to understand the value of setting up robust networks for research management in a country like India. Over to you, Simon.
Good. Let me just check you can hear me.
Yes, you're audible.
Good. So Vijay, what was running, and by the way, good morning, Dr. Swarup. It's so nice to see you. We really, really miss our friends. I really mean that, how much we miss what I call my work family. And what was running through my mind actually as Vijay was speaking, and I hope you won't mind this, it sounds a little pretentious, but I was a director of the British Council in Israel, and I remember I was at a function once, and I was the speaker after one of Israel's most sort of famous Nobel Prize winning writers, and I got away with it by telling a joke, and I dug myself out of that hole. But following Vijay is no small thing. It's lovely to see you, Vijay. And to Vasan also, you're doing great in the job as CEO. Right. So I guess what I want to say is, for me, it's a matter of great pride that this conference is taking place and that you've invited me to make opening remarks, because, Vasan, if you can permit me just to go back a few years, the India Alliance has been running since 2008. And then more recently, we started to work in Africa in a different way, where we set up the Alliance for Accelerating Excellence in Science in Africa, called IESA. And that was significant because, a little bit like, Wellcome's venture with the DBT in India, it was Wellcome's approach to sort of to letting go and enabling leadership and management of programs and decision making, really, where they should be in the countries where the funding is utilized. And at that moment, when we established IESA, within Wellcome, we were given some flexibility to think about, so you've made these big investments in fellowships, but what can we now do to encourage and support this sort of the broader research ecosystem? And what I'm also going to say now is, and I've said this so many times, I'm incredibly sensitive and cautious about making observations, judgments from sitting here thousands of miles away in West Sussex. And under lockdown, it feels even more remote now. In a different world, I might have been sitting there with you. and then you might have permitted my observations. But at that time, and I guess it's about 5 years ago, really to inform ourselves and to think about how we might support and invest, we did commission some work looking at research management. You know, if nothing else, you have to build the internal case, you know, when you're going to make investments. And the people we asked to work with us came from the UK's Association for Research Management, and they looked at they visited a number of countries in Africa, and they also visited India, and that informed our thinking. One of the things in fact, I want to say straight away is that there's this danger of suggesting that we thought of or invented research management 3 or 4 years ago. Whoever has done research has been managing research. So it is, you know, researchers have been managing their research for years and years. And I guess the question here is, could it be done differently, more collaboratively, or more efficiently? But one of the observations that these consultants made, and I won't name which African country, and it's one of those things where someone says something, you ask them 2 or 3 times to say, are you sure? But, you know, researchers were interviewed who had so much administration that they did their research at weekends. I'm told that's true. But what it did at least was convince us that some kind of support for research management would be appropriate. Now, given the way that we were starting to work at Wellcome, the answer was not to send experts overseas to tell you how to do it. That's the old way. And in fact, I think they would be put on a plane straight home and quarantined had they done that. So we did the same in both ISA, which, you know, supports the African continent, and we established a program there by helping ISA to recruit a research management leader, and that has now grown into a program called REMPRO. I'll just say a little bit about that because Vasan, you invited me to reflect. And tell me when I'm running out of time, Vasan, as well. That program is designed very deliberately with 4 strands. The first of those strands actually thinks about financial sustainability. So, you know, is the way that research management is structured sustainable? So, you know, are there appropriate charges on grants, etc., etc.? It sounds really obvious, but it's part of a sustainable structure. The second is, does research management have, so what I should say is that we have commissioned some work with ISA looking at the sort of full economic costing of research, and that's about institutional behavior. It's also about funder behavior. You know, we're paying appropriate overheads and on grants. The second is about leadership. Is there senior top leadership for research management? And, you know, listening to Vijay talk about it, I think certainly in India, you have leadership right at the very, very, very top. And I think it's incredibly important. That sends a signal to institutional leaders. The third is interesting, and it's about standards. Are there consistent standards for research management? And we have a parallel program we've supported called the Good Financial Grants Practice Program. Some of you will have heard of. And that has inspired now similar work, looking to see whether one can develop and embed standards for research management. And the fourth, and it's very deliberately fourth, is training, because the initial reaction from any consultant is say what you need is more training. So I very deliberately put that last but not least, that one needs to be developing not just trained research managers, but career paths for research management, so that they also see viable pathways for their career. Vasan has already outlined what happened in India, but if I may just say, and I want to embarrass Savita quite deliberately here, so I can't see her, but I hope she's suitably embarrassed, is that really sometimes good luck plays a role. And just at the time where we're talking to Shaid Jamil and others about could we, you know, help you develop this program in India, who should appear but Savita, beautifully qualified, having done her PhD in developmental biology in Cambridge. She spent 2 years doing grants management at Wellcome, I believe, and she helped set up research management at NCBS, and then she appeared on the scene as someone interested in taking research management to a sort of a broader ecosystem. So luck played a big part there, but we're so glad that Savita took up this leadership role. So if I just say a little bit about what the future could look like from where we sit at Wellcome, in Wellcome's new strategy, there's a really big premium now placed on supporting strong research culture. It's not for Wellcome, and I look at the Secretary of DVD here, it's not for us to say what the appropriate research culture is in Indian institutions, but just to say that I think Wellcome has now learned that you don't only value research through papers, not even just through impact, but the way we treat each other as human beings in the workplace. And so matters of diversity, inclusion, strong policies for supporting women in the workplace, anti-harassment, etc., is all has a much higher place. And indeed, one of the new divisions at Wellcome is called Research Environment in our new strategy and our new structure. So that's really important to us. Obviously, I will say from a Wellcome point of view, but also as an India Alliance trustee, we hope that those organizations or institutions in India that benefit the most from receiving multiple India Alliance fellowships, we hope that you will be leading the way in thinking about, what role research management can play both in institutions, but also, as Vijay has said, sort of more broadly within the research ecosystem, and what that collaboration can be. And I guess the final thing to say was that a conference like this, and indeed the efforts that you've gone to make this work online is such an important part of the positive influence that a major global funder like the India Alliance can play. I know I've forgotten to say something, but again, thanks so much to our partners at DBT, who I'll never stop saying how much Wellcome values our partnership with you. It's fantastic to say that Vijay in all these different incarnations, continues to be a leader for India Alliance, and obviously sort of, delighted to see the new CEO in place with this team. And if any of my team are on the call listening, so frustrating when you can't see, I thank my team for all the support they give for the India Alliance. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Simon, for those wonderful insights on the experiences from having run this and built institutions across Europe as well as in Africa. Thank you for those valuable inputs. Now it's time for me to introduce the next speaker, Dr. Renu Swarup. It's my privilege and honor to introduce Dr. Renu Swarup, who is the Secretary of Department of Biotechnology, one of our major funders for India Alliance. So Dr. Swarup has been an influential leader at DBT for nearly 29 years. She was actively engaged in the formulation of several key strategic initiatives, including the biotechnology vision way back in 2001. I would probably call it a landmark document which really set the tone for biotechnology research in India. Subsequently, she played a very influential role in the National Biotechnology Development Strategy in 2007, which again further built on the original policy in 2001, really bringing in public-private partnerships into the main focus of research. And more recently, as the member secretary of the Expert Committee 2015 to 2020, the Strategy 2. So she's also the chairperson of Biotechnology Industry Research Assistant Council, short form BIRAC, which again is a very visible organization or an impactful entity which has really played a pivotal role to nurture and promote innovation research in the biotech enterprise, with special focus on startups and SMEs. And we really have seen the fruition of this initiative in what we are seeing in our fight against COVID. Whatever has come out in terms of our national mission, in terms of vaccines, diagnostics, and really accelerating our response to the COVID, thanks to a lot of these things coming out of these initiatives. And Dr. Swarup has been awarded the National Entrepreneurship Award in 2017. And she was also awarded the Biospectrum Person of the Year Award in 2012. So Dr. Swarup, what the audience looks for is your insights. And if you could share your vision around research management. You have been a vocal proponent of capacity building in India. And as the Secretary of DBT, we would really like to hear from you. What does research management mean to you, and how do you see the future panning out for us? Thank you so much, and over to you. Swarup, you're on mute. You're on mute. We can't hear you.
Am I audible now?
You are.
Okay.
Thank you. We can hear you now.
Thank you, Dr. VijayRaghavan, Simon, and everyone who I cannot see because of this virtual frame, but all of you who are there, Savita and the whole team at the India Alliance. It's always a pleasure to be part of any of these events, and I think this particular conference that you have organized for the India Research Management Initiative, I think it's not just a wonderful initiative, but very timely, considering that we are now moving on to looking at what the future is going to hold for us for research post the pandemic. And I think post the pandemic, it's going to be a totally different world from what it was pre-pandemic. And that's how we're going to recognize it, pre-pandemic and post-pandemic. And I think two reasons I say that. One is, of course, there has been a huge change in the work culture. Not just the virtual connections that we've had, the deliveries, the time schedules with which we've delivered, the response that science has had to this pandemic, facing all the various challenges which came to us through the pandemic, that itself has really brought in a huge cultural change. And moving forward, I'm confident that this is really going to be the expectation as we move ahead. The expectation from science to deliver to much greater heights than what we ever imagined. Shortened timelines. If you can get a vaccine within 10 months, there are going to be more expectations from the scientific research group as we move forward. But more importantly, I think the key factor that has really exhibited its strength in this pandemic response of science is the collaborations. And I think that has come out in the forefront. And for anything like what we have seen during this pandemic to perform as we move forward, management of that research is going to be so very important to be able to take this ahead. If you see how we were positioned, and I think Professor VijayRaghavan outlined very well the key role that the DBT Wellcome Trust India Alliance program has played, not just in bringing to the forefront biomedical research, which is credited for bringing out some of the outstanding research capacities that it has created. But as Simon said, I think this has been a wonderful example of an excellent collaboration between different agencies. Collaborating because we have a common objective. Collaborating because we believe that collectively we would be able to bring strength and add value to something that will be important not just for the Indian ecosystem, not just for the Wellcome and UK ecosystem, but the global ecosystem. And I think that really was the strength that brought us together. And the India Alliance moving this sort of an initiative is again, one of the major strengths and the major steps that you have taken for building capacities, which the India Alliance program has been doing so beautifully in different areas. If you also look back and see, we have moved a long way from what the research began a couple of decades back, from a single investigator research to a multi-investigator, single institution, multi-institutional, single agency to multi-agency. And as I said, moving ahead, it's going to be totally an interdisciplinary research we're talking about, different collaborations, national, international, philanthropic, the CSR funding, different aspects of it. And if we still expect the researchers to manage each of the components of their research, I think that's really setting our expectations too high. On the other side, if you initially ask a researcher, they would all say, well, we've been really managing our research. Why do we need an outsider to come and manage our research for us? I mean, if they've got their desk untidy, they would rather keep it untidy and not have it tidied up. If you tell them, no, this is how you're putting it, setting a set of SOPs in place or helping them to move ahead. Traditionally, researchers would never like anything to be meddled with. But you also have to understand this, that the value that research managers bring into this ecosystem is tremendous. And if we're talking about this large, it's not about an individual's research that's going to matter. It's about the larger research ecosystem. It's about the delivery which is being expected, for which we really need to bring in this key aspect. And I firmly believe that this is moving ahead a very important career path which we need to build for many outstanding scientists who would look at then not just looking at their own research but managing research. And I think that is most important. You talk about the funding agencies. Many a times I have had this question asked myself, and all those who are in funding agencies or who have been grants managers have been asked, how did you feel leaving a laboratory and getting into science management or grants management? And I always have this answer, it's been a very satisfying experience, because yes, you're not just doing your own research, but you're facilitating a lot of research to happen. And I think that's exactly what the research management initiative is all about. If you did not have research managers, if you did not have science management groups, believe me, the tasks which would have been set out just for the researchers would be so cumbersome. And you need this very important facilitation within the ecosystem. And that also helps us to amplify a lot of what we are doing, because you have this group which is with you to help you to move ahead. Today, we are also seeing a shift in the way science and research is performing. And Professor VijayRaghavan also alluded to that when he said the expectations are different. We do have different set of expectations, but there is one clear expectation that you're looking at a very clear outcome, that it all is outcome driven. So we do have different performance measurement matrices which are set out, whether it's an output outcome framework or whether there are global benchmarks and indices that we put in. There are different ways in which these performances are measured. It's also important because today, more than ever earlier, we do see very well the connect between basic, applied, fundamental, translational science. We also see very clearly that these do not really need to exist in silos. They need to be connected with each other. And many a times when researchers are engaged deeply in their own research, it's difficult to make these connections unless you have a facilitation ecosystem that helps you to make these connections. And I think that's where the research management teams make it so important for this to move forward. It's also important because now, while we are looking at a vision and a mission statement for each organization, each of our institutes, whether it's in India, the DBT institutes or the CSIR institutes or the ICMR institutes, or since it's totally interdisciplinary now, you have the Department of Atomic Energy, the Department of Space, each has their own very well-defined vision and mission. But then there are also components, as I said, which need to respond to a larger mission and vision. And that's either a national mission or a global challenge that we are all responding to. While each scientist and researcher puts in their best effort to respond to obviously their own curiosity or their own science-driven research that they're taking forward, there is also a commitment that they have to be able to bring in a component that aligns with this larger goal. So how do you make those connections? Again, the research management teams have very important roles to see how the research which is being done by the individual scientists helps the individual scientist's own growth, whether their career path or their research that they're taking forward, and seeing how it connects to the larger ecosystem and the larger vision. And there is always a connection. Many times the researchers are not able to figure that out because, as I said, they're so deeply involved and engaged in their own research that making those connections becomes difficult. It's also important now because the governance model in which we handle our research is changing. There are we are innovating in our research. We've got a strong focus on innovation, research and innovation. There is also innovation in the processes and the models of governance that is coming in. So as I said, from projects which funding agencies support, which are single institutional or multi-institutional or multi-agency, we also have these cluster concepts now, in which you have the universities, the research institutes, the startups, the incubators, all working together. And our effort is we are trying to strengthen these more and more, and not just nationally, but internationally. So who makes those connections? Again, it's the research management teams which help to make those connections. So when we look at research management teams, it's not just about facilitating grant writing. That's an important component, writing research grants, mobilizing resources and finances, but it's also important to keep in place within the institution a very, very strong focus on the policy perspective. And here again, the research ethics that we talk about. And as we are progressing more and more into collaborative models of research, I think there is a larger focus on the research ethics. That is because we're looking at data sharing, we're looking at knowledge sharing, we're looking at the startups, we're looking at the industries becoming partners. How do you look at your intellectual property? How do you share your knowledge and yet make sure that you've retained your intellectual property? While we do have tech transfer and technology management offices which do keep their eye on it, and in India, we are still trying to build a lot of that strength. And I think we need to do much more in that, but it's begun. You can see it happening in many institutes now. But I think, again, connecting the research and science with this is a key aspect which the research management team play a very important role, and they would need to focus on that. I was very pleased to go through the agenda of your conference and see that you've covered practically all these aspects. So, Vasan, congratulations to you, Savita, and the entire team which has put this together. And you have some excellent names on your conference agenda. We're going to discuss all these issues. I am sure that you must be having a good participation. This is a wonderful beginning to what would be setting probably a series of these across. And I would really like to see these not just in our national institutes, but moving even to our universities. Because I think within our national institutes of our science funding agencies, we have gotten more into these collaborative modes of research funding, which some of these institutes have also been able to imbibe the best global practices, and research management has started making its way into these institutes. But there is a lot of excellent research. There's a lot of knowledge that gets generated from this university. And I think probably within India, the India Alliance, it would really be wonderful if you could think of taking this across. I really don't know what your participation is today, how many people you have from the university ecosystem. But I think this is something that you should really try to see, that you bring in more people from the university ecosystem so that we could spread this culture of research management across. But having said that, it's also important for us then to make sure we have sufficient research managers to be able to provide the necessary facilitation to this ecosystem. So I think it's important to build a very good career path for these research managers, and there would be different ways in which we could try and support this. We'll be very happy, Simon, Vasan, to discuss, to see if there is some way in which we could help build a skilled pool of professionals within the country of research managers, because while on one side we are asking them to take on research management, we must have a pool of skilled people who can provide these services and this wonderful, and I do feel this is a wonderful career path that they will be able to respond to. So thank you very much. I don't want to keep you from your excellent conference that you're going into, but I would just like to conclude by saying, let's not look at research management initiative with a very narrow focus. I think it's got much, much broader implications, probably even larger than what we've discussed today. And the right people to tell us how it would impact their research are the researchers themselves. And I'm sure at the end of this conference, you'll get a wonderful feedback from the researchers, how they would like to see their research managed. And probably that is what feedback we would love to take, Vasan, from this, and see how we could build the next of your series and maybe a pool of skilled human resource who can facilitate not just within, maybe even we could help other agencies to take it forward. So thank you very much. Thank you for having me here, and good luck for this wonderful conference. Very happy to take a feedback. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Renu, for this wonderful articulation of the role of a research manager in knowledge creation, value creation, how to share and protect the data. And you also clearly articulated how the research managers can be an enabler of research and innovation within the India. And you beautifully articulated the evolution of research, how it has evolved in the last decade or so, from people doing research in silos to partnerships within the country as well as internationally. Thank you so much, and also for your support and openness to really help us to amplify this initiative, which is first of its kind in India now, to really make it grow much larger and bigger in terms of creating that pool of research managers. This, I think, is really going to augur very well with all the participants in this call. Thank you so much. And I would take the opportunity to thank all the three speakers for really setting this stage for this wonderful event. And we'll get back to you with all the deliberations that have happened in the next 4 days, coming back with recommendations that come out of this 4-day event. Thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate your enthusiasm and support as always. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. That was a wonderful inaugural session, anchored by Dr. VijayRaghavan. Then we had Simon from Wellcome, as well as Dr. Renu. I think it's really wonderful. The best we could have asked for in this opening session. Over to you, Savita, now to take us through the next part of the session.
Thank you very much, Vasan. It's been an amazing start to the IRMI Annual Conference. It's just so motivating and inspiring to have heard all our speakers. I think we might be able to take a short break, actually, before we start the session again at 3:30. So we just request all our viewers to maybe just, I think you can take a little bit of a break, but we'll reconvene for 3:30. And our first speaker in the second session is going to be Dr. Shaid Jamil. So we'll reconvene in 5 minutes time. So maybe get a nice cup of coffee and settle down for, a wonderful afternoon of amazing talks again after this first session. Thank you for joining, Shaid. So we'll be back in 5 minutes. So for all our listeners, please stay tuned in. You can just maybe get a cup of coffee, but this is the link, and we will just restart at 3:30 exactly. All right, so it's 3:30 and we can now get set with the second session of the conference. And it's my absolute pleasure and privilege to invite Dr. Shaid Jamil to give the first talk in the second session. So Dr. Jamil is a virologist. He was the former CEO of the India Alliance. He has spent a lot of years both as a researcher, as a research manager, as the head of a funding agency, and now he's back to a new career back as a scientist. So, Shahid, it'd be lovely to hear from you what your thoughts are on research management and research management in India particularly, since you've given a lot of years thinking about this. Over to you, Shahid.
Thank you very much, Savita. You can hear me, right?
Yes, yes.
Okay, wonderful. Well, it's great to be back among friends. I can't see you, but still good to be back among friends. Hi, Vasan. Wonderful to see you and wonderful to be here. Let me start my presentation. Okay. So I will be talking about funding landscapes and really the value of research management. So let me start by talking about the research cycle. You know, you develop an idea, and that idea, of course, cannot be put into action unless you have money to do it. So that's when you apply for funds. Once you get the funds, you really plan how you're going to be moving forward. You do your experiments, you record your results, you process your results, and you publish them. You read more papers, others read your work, get more ideas, and the cycle continues. Well, the two bottlenecks in the cycle are funding and publishing. If you can't get money to do your research, you can't do your research. If you don't publish, then you don't get your next grant. So those are really the two bottlenecks that all researchers have to deal with. So research is not easy. You know, when you enter graduate school, a first-year PhD student thinks that they can go from point A to point B, and it's going to be a linear path. By the time you get into your second year of PhD, definitely by the time you get into your third year of PhD, you realize that the path from A to B is not a straight path. You lose your way while trying to get to B, and you get to a point C, which you didn't really want to get to in the first place. Nevertheless, if your mind by then is prepared, you find something useful at point C. So that's about research. And if you are a researcher, if you're running a group, you have to constantly deal with these uncertainties, while at the same time managing expectations from first-year graduate students who still think that point A to B is a linear path. You know, there is a value for systems as well as access. Science is built based on previous discoveries. But this idea of cumulative innovation is really simple to understand. It's intuitive. But the mechanisms through which you arrive at this are not intuitive at all. And you know, studies have shown, and I just cite two studies here. One is that resource centers, whether it's a fly resource center or a plasmid bank or a reagent bank somewhere, all of those speed up innovation. Whereas limiting access to information, for example, like Celera tried to sell genes, and limiting access to other information slows down innovation. And that's why sharing is important, and that's why open access is important, and That's why at India Alliance, we were the first organization in India to subscribe to the DORA, the Declaration of Research Assessments, as well as have a very active open access policy. So the point is that institutions and policies that are able to build robust systems to improve access will always have very useful effects on innovation. And in the context of the world today, let me cite this example of COVID. By now, by one estimate, there are about 100,000 publications. By another estimate, there are about 200,000 publications on COVID just in 2020. Most of these papers are open access. They are on preprint servers and all over the place. What that has done is to improve diagnostics. It has improved treatment protocols. Pre-existing research on vaccine platforms, whether it was Moderna or Pfizer working on cancer vaccines, or whether it was Oxford AstraZeneca working on a malaria vaccine, all these research platforms were pre-existing, and they have been repurposed to essentially make COVID vaccines. As a result, we have about 200 vaccines in the pipeline, over 60 vaccines in clinical testing, and at least 8 vaccines approved, some full use, some limited use, within 12 months of the sequence of the virus becoming available in the first week of January 2020. And that has only happened because of systems and access. So let me talk to you something that is called the Quadrant model of scientific research. It's also called Pasteur's Quadrant. And this is something that a man named Donald Stokes proposed in another context in '97. And Balram wrote a very nice piece on it in Current Science, almost 12 years back. And this really compares what fundamental research is and what use-inspired or applied research is. So an example of high level of fundamental research would be the atomic theory, Niels Bohr's work. Very high quality, but purely fundamental research. An example of applied research would be Thomas Alva Edison's work on invention of the light bulb. However, Pasteur, with his germ theory and with the pasteurization and discoveries related to that, was a combination of very high quality fundamental research, which had huge applications. Your average academic R&D or industrial R&D is in the left lower quadrant. And really the question is, how do we get from the left lower quadrant into the right upper quadrant? So let me turn the axes around and say where most institutions are and where ideal institutions are. And the two axes, as you will see, are financial resources and administrative flexibility. So how do you get from where most institutions are to where an ideal institution should be? And there are only two ways around this. So you either bring financial resources first and then give administrative flexibility, or you bring flexibility first and then give resources. But you have to do both before you get to an ideal position. Now, again, going from where most institutions are to ideal institutions, there is a certain pathway for this reform. And just like reaction kinetics are, just like molecules work, institutions work the same way. There is an energy barrier, and that energy barrier can only be reduced with a catalyst. And since we are all biologists, we can understand catalysts very well when we talk about enzymes. Enzymes do this. They reduce the activation energy of a reaction. So what is the barrier and what reduces the activation energy of this barrier? And those are these three fundamental things: the quality of people that you hire in institutions, the amount of flexibility that you give them, and at a state level, at a country level, as well as at the regional level, the public will to support research and the political ambience to not just support research, but encourage open thinking and raising doubts and raising questions. So here is the research funding divide. You have a researcher at one end who likes to do research, is trained to do research, but hates filling all those forms, loves to use scientific jargon, is poor with numbers unless it comes to p-values, and follows SOPs very nicely for research. On the other hand, you have people who work at funding agencies who like to support research, who are trained in administration, who really love forms that are filled properly, who hate scientific jargon, who are good with budget numbers, and who follow SOPs in management. And both of these have very different questions to ask of the ecosystem. The researcher wants to know why the process at the funding agency is so complicated. Can someone help her? Why does it always take so long after the grant has gone in for decisions to be made? Why has money not arrived even though the grant has been approved? And why does she have to fill so many reports? On the other hand, at the funding agency, we ask, why is the application missing key elements? Why is it written in a language that a normal person cannot understand it? Why is the institution so detached in this whole process? Why don't they send reports on time? Who do I speak to if I call institutions? So there is this divide. And that's where research management comes in. Research managers are those jugglers who are good with numbers, who are good with understanding the scientific language, who can understand the scientific jargon and convert it into language that a sensible person can understand, who can work with timelines, and who's good at making presentations. So all of these come together in a good research manager, and of course, who follows process, who's bright, and who can have ideas. So research management for India. You know, India is India has a growing research and innovation ecosystem where investments are being made towards new institutions, bringing in more researchers, creating more research infrastructure. If you look at the Science and Technology Innovation Policy 2020, which is up for public discussion for another few days now, it aims to increase funds to 2% of GDP. Right now, it's less than 1% of GDP. So where would that extra money come from? Largely, that extra money will come from private funders, from philanthropic funding. So once that increases, it's imperative that we will need much better communication than we're doing now. If you look at the RM gaps in India, the research management gaps in India, there was a Wellcome trust scoping study done in 2016. And we at India Alliance at the 2017 Fellows meeting discussed this. What emerged out of that was a survey that we did in 2017 for the existing support that is provided at institutions for researchers, for research management and for research misconduct. And all of that really led to the India Research Management Initiative, which we started as a pilot program in February 2018. And I echo Simon's sentiments entirely to say that all the stars really aligned, and really the brightest star on the horizon was Savita, who joined us and has really been helping us with this program. So in the 1 year scoping, the pilot program, Savita got in touch with 31 different institutions across the country to seek answers to research management structures in the country. And as you have already seen, we published the results of that in a Wellcome Open Research article that appeared first on the 31st of January 2019. And as you will see from the metrics, this paper has actually been quite a hit. More than 100 downloads, more than 1,300 views for this paper. So what were the recommendations? The first recommendation was build research offices, because Indian investigators spend a lot of time on administration. The outreach to funding agencies is really required for creating an efficient system. Institutions should really build these research development offices, but also individual researchers ought to help in this process, and it will help connect peers across India as well as use professional organizations for cross-learning. The other recommendation was to have a good pre-award grants management system in place, which was really missing at most institutions. Grants applicants will then receive timely support, and institutional leadership can also do proper due diligence on applications that are going out from their institutions. Not having proper management really compromises the abilities of both the individual investigator as well as institutional leaders. And especially when you're talking about multi-institutional projects, team science grants, they suffer quite a bit because of delays and improper alignments. There were other recommendations. Use flexible approaches, as various organizations are very diverse. Provide sustainable research management careers and a progression path for that career track. Have capacity building initiatives in the form of workshops, conferences, peer learning. Pay attention to gender issues. It's not really required that research management is populated only by people of one gender. Again, like every other thing, bring gender balance into this. And there's a need for wider participation across the country. So our approach at that time at India Alliance was to convert the pilot into a 5-year program, which had specific allocation towards fellowships, grants, travel grants, workshops, and conferences. And this is really one of those first large conferences. I am really very proud and to be a part of that today. Well, I'll simply end by thanking everyone who's been involved. It's been an exciting journey, and those of you who are going to be managing this ahead from here, Vasan and Savita and Vishi, all of you, all the very best, and really all the very best, and a big thank you to all my colleagues at India Alliance. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Shaid. That was a wonderful introduction to the session. So this session is focused on research management as a global profession. So Shaid, your talk provided the context of how we have started approaching building research management as a profession for India. And I noticed on your slides, the last slide had a photograph of a small group of us at INOMS in Edinburgh, 2018. And that was the first time a group of us from India actually experienced a research management conference. And it's really lovely to see that a couple of colleagues from that group actually formed the planning committee for this conference in 2021. So we're hoping that our learnings through this conference will then continue to perpetuate. So thank you very much, Shaid. On that note, I invite our next speaker, that is Dr. Makiko Takahashi. Makiko is from the Kanazawa Institute of Technology in Japan, and she's also the vice chair of IRMIAC. Hi, Maki. So Makiko is the vice chair of the Japanese Research Management Association, and you have spent more than a decade helping to build research management as a profession in Japan. And so it's a privilege to have Dr. Makiko Takahashi here with us today. She's going to tell us about how all your efforts have led towards building research management in Japan. So thank you very much. Over to you, Maki.
Hello everyone, I'm Makiko Takahashi. Today, as Vice Chair and one of the founders of the Research Managers and Administrator Network Japan, from this point on, abbreviated as IRMIAC, I'm very happy to share our activities and histories of the challenges. Personally, I have more than 20 years of experience as a practitioner of intellectual property management, university-industry collaboration, tech transfer, and research strategies in 2 national universities and 1 national research institute. During much of that time, we Japanese did not have the concept of research management and administration. Oh, sorry. Here is a 10-year history. I will show you a current snapshot of the Japanese URA situation. Nowadays, there are about 1,460 URAs engaged in research management. As you can see, from 2011, in the past 10 years, total number of URAs has been increasing steadily. That's great, isn't it? In most cases, increase the number of people means raising the visibility of our field. But more precisely, I suppose it's the government standpoint of view. I think we also need to understand the standpoint of the practitioners themselves. You can imagine, sometimes we have some questions such as URA, what kind of job is it? Or URA, is it kind of research assistant? It's a small joke in Japanese that URA is read as Ura in Japanese sound. And the sound Ura means backside, not front side in Japanese. And you know, front and back has the same image as main and sub, star player and suborder, or official and unofficial, etc. So because Ura in Japanese, we are Ura, is a kind of funny but cynical joke among Japanese colleagues. But we would like to change this impression other people have in the future. So, based on Sabita's recommendation, today I prepared these 3 topics. Firstly, Japanese current status of University Research Administration, URA. Secondly, our association, IRMIAC, and especially the third topic, skill standard and upcoming certification system. To recognize our value, we need to have a standard with clear language to explain our professional activities. It's one of our actual challenges in changing our Ura situation. First, let me share an overview of Japanese URA with these 4 graphs. About gender, males are in the majority. I suppose this trend is different from UK and USA maybe. About age groups, those under 40s are in the majority. Third graph, pre-affiliation, URA is a profession of academia, but it's a new one. So there's so many practitioners have experience in other sectors. The majority is industry, especially R&D, intellectual property, business development, like this. And lastly, it's also important, the financial source of employment. Internal means usually stable budget of university, and related to the occupation will be like a tenure. And outside means the opposite, term limited employment usually. Here's a figure that shows the main role of URA is different depend on the university size. As the top of the figure, 39 universities have only one URA. In general, universities with only one URA make the person part of university-industry collaboration. Then, if the number of URAs in a university is larger, the ratio of pre-award is larger. Conversely, the ratio of university-industry collaboration will be relatively smaller. And as you can see, about 38 universities, most of which are big research-intensive universities, have more than 11 URAs. It means big office. Usually, the main position for these URAs are in departments, not as headquarters. And based on their individual backgrounds, such as pharmaceutical, physics, chemistry, or IT, information technology, they plan and manage governmental competitive research fund in their department. So from this figure, you can see that depending on the URA office of each university, the function and the required skill are different. Then I will briefly introduce our IRMIAC activities. These are some pictures from our 5th annual conference in 2019. The plenary session was about the upcoming skill standard. The speakers are included 1 government official and 3 vice presidents from 3 big national research universities. Talking about the positive impact of a conference, especially meet on-site. You know that because URA is a relatively new profession, sometimes our colleagues are the only URAs at their university. Therefore, we believe that to establish ourselves in the profession, we need a professional community to share ideas, recognize excellence, and applaud success. Here is the overview of URAs worldwide. The larger associations are IRMA, Simon, the former president, and ARMS in Australia, IRMA, SRA, and Nordic in North America. The largest and oldest association is Inaugural. they celebrate their 70th anniversary in 2019. On the contrary, IRMIAC launched in 2015, 6 years ago, and are a comparatively young association. Happily enough, the number of IRMIAC members has been increasing steadily. So from this point on in my presentation, I like to introduce my third important topic about the skill standard and the upcoming certification system. Okay, let me give you some background information about the necessity for URA. Usually, in Japanese science and technology policies, the necessity is summarized in these 4 points: internationalization, interdisciplinarization of research, strong demand to contribute innovation through research, severe financial situation, especially the decrease in the basic budget. And our most important issue is, especially in Japanese context, relative decline in research productivity. Because of this situation, Japanese universities are under tremendous pressure to acquire adequate research funds. The university strategy should be to move from individual to organizational. The trend has been growing stronger since 2004. It's the period of national universities incorporation. Because this is a serious issue for universities, the ministry designed and started delivering a series of programs for the Japanese URA system in 2011. Okay, here is an overview of our history. It's a little busy, but try to explain. Firstly, you can see the dark blue boxes in the middle. These are the ministry programs for the last 10 years. The ministry programs are constructed in 3 parts: first program and second and third. The first program, actually, I personally think it is the most important program for us. But anyway, the first program ran from 2011 to 15. It was divided into Menu A and Menu B. Menu A is all for Japan, and Menu A divided into 2 parts: Skill Standard and Educational Program. Menu B refers to the feasibility of launching a new URA office in 15 universities. The budget mainly for employee URA, but unlimited. The second program started in 2013 and will finish in 2012. Its purpose is to enhance university research capabilities. In 2013, Ministry selected 22 universities and research institutes based on their proposal. And important information is both programs, first and second, are competitive. So each university make its proposal to get their budget. Then, from the standpoint of skill standard, let's check it. The first version of skill standard I will introduce later, but it's the basic concept of the first program of Menu A. During these 4 years of first program, we developed version 1 to version 2 as the result of first program. And during the second program, 22 universities tried to make their own URL functions, each one being quite diverse. Happily, the ministry understands the importance and they prepared a 2-year budget. This is written as the third program, like this. Okay, here is the version 1 skill. The concept was originated from a conversation with David Richardson during Inaugural Annual Conference in 2008, very long ago. Actually, it was the first time for me to take part in Inaugural Annual Conference. Inaugural headquarters members kindly introduced the topic of what is research management in the USA. At that time, I personally enjoyed my professional position in my university, but I didn't have any colleagues, not only at my universities, but also at most of all the big research universities in Japan. So I was very impressed with the Inaugural Conference, especially the way they shared ideas, recognized excellence, and applaud success in such a friendly and warm atmosphere. After I went back to Japan, I introduced the importance of URA and the spirit of Inaugural to Japanese ministry. Version 2 is the main result of Menu A1, which is skill standard by the University of Tokyo with the first program, which ran from 2011 to 15. I will not go into detail now, but it consists of 3 main groups like this, and 9 other fields. For example, intellectual property, university-industry collaboration, international collaboration like this. Okay. This is the final slide of my talk. It's almost very simple, isn't it? And maybe you don't need explanation, but I only have 2 more minutes for my time, so I try to explain. Based on work done by IRMIAC, which was financially supported by the ministry in 2019 and 2020, this is the upcoming actual educational program and certification system as the 3rd program. Firstly, I will briefly explain the whole structure of our plan. The vertical information is experience, achievement. The horizontal information is ability and capability. And here's the beginner, here's the excellence experienced person. First, I wanted to point out the 3 levels of educational program. You can see the light pink, it is the fundamental level educational program. And the dark pink is the core level. And the multicolored information is the advanced level. Each of these levels consists of 15 subjects, such as accounting, intellectual property, pre-award and post-award. Next, I'd like to point out the certification system, green one and blue one. The green box means certified URA. As you can see here, after you finish the core level and successfully pass the exam, you become a certified URA. You need at least 3 years of experience to begin the core level program. Similarly, when you complete the advanced level program, after you finish the core level and successfully pass the exam, you become a specialized certified URA. You need at least 8 years of experience to begin this advanced level program. And for those of you who are leaders and president of associations, here are some important questions. Who or which organization or agency will manage this whole system? And another important question is, how many employees do you need to move this system? But we, as the headquarters of IRMIAC, the major association of Japanese URAs, stay in close communication with the ministry as we request funding for the coming years. This is the very latest information of URSQ standard and upcoming certification system in Japan. So finally, here's the information about INOMOS 2021. INOMOS 2020 was scheduled to be in Hiroshima, Japan in 2020, but was postponed to May 21. Nori, my colleague, will be another session speaker in the IRMIA and will give you more details. We at IRMIAC welcome you all to take part in INOMOS 2021. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Maki, for your presentation. I think, so research management as a profession, it's very well developed in countries like the US and the UK, of course, and it is now being adopted more widely by a lot of countries across the world. So naturally, it does take a lot of investment of time, effort, and funding to build capacity, to put these kind of programs in place, put the training in place, to have the resources who can actually deliver on these programs. So it was really nice to hear, your story from Japan, how the IRMIAC has, approached this aspect of capacity building over a little bit more than a decade. Thank you very much for joining, and we'll come back, Maki. We'll meet all the speakers as a panel at the end of this session. Thanks a lot. So on that note, it's my pleasure to invite the next speaker, the final speaker for today's session. As I just said, research management has perhaps originated in countries like the US and the UK, but is now being adopted widely across the world. So, and that is really the purpose of today's session too, which is to look at research management as a global profession. So it's a pleasure to invite Dr. Simon Kerridge. He's the Director of Research Services at the University of Kent. Simon has more than 2.5 decades of research management experience at various levels. You've played a very major role in shaping the activities of the UK research management, the IRMA, that's the Association of Research Managers and Administrators in the UK. And Simon, you also have a very widespread interest in research management practice all across the world. You are a member of the board of IRMA and various other activities that you take part in. So Simon, you're here today to tell us about the RAP2 survey. So on that note, I mean, maybe we'll just hear about the RAP2 survey, and yeah, over to you, Simon. Yeah.
Hi, so good morning, everybody, or good afternoon, depending on where you are in the world. My name is Simon Kerridge, and I will be giving you 20 minutes on RMA, Research Management Administration, a global profession. I'll talk a little bit about myself, my favorite subject. I've got one slide on my university, don't worry, I'll skip over that. I'll talk about RMA, and then my other favorite acronym, RAP, with 3 A's. INORMS you may already have heard about, and then I will present some data about what research managers and administrators are. So here I am with my dogs. I've got lots of acronyms on here. If anybody is interested in any of those acronyms, ask me afterwards or send me an email or whatever. So I won't dwell on these. For those of you who've seen my presentation before, I'm sorry. This is what I feel I look like. That's what my wife thinks I look like, and that's what I look like in the morning when I look at myself in the mirror. So, as I say, the obligatory slide about my university. We have campuses all around the southeast of the UK and also on continental Europe. We have students, or at least we used to have students pre-COVID. That's where I'm based, the Red Blob in Canterbury, historic city. And for those of you who don't know where the UK is, there we are at the centre of the universe, of course. So, what is a research manager and administrator? Well, there are a number of definitions being provided mainly by people who are research managers and administrators. I quite like Julie Stackhouse's one there, which is all to do with anything that universities can do to support research, embrace research, not just universities, but research organizations more generally, but also people who work in research funders, so all part of that ecosystem. So anything that supports research. So anyway, to find out a bit more about research managers and administrators, I started off a project called RAP, and I will talk about that and the successor projects as we go through. Just a quick slide on the state of play in the UK, if you like. So we have the Association of Research Managers and Administrators in the UK, IRMA. It's now almost 30 years old. It was founded in 1991, and you can see from the graph here that we start off with very few members and now have around 3,000 members. As the profession was growing in the UK, we found more people who were research managers, administrators, and came together to share best practice. A brief advert for IRMIAC 2021. I'm sure you'll be hearing more about that. It'll be the biggest and best research management and administration conference in the world ever. It's a biennial event in Hiroshima, hopefully in person. So what do research managers and administrators do? Well, we decided to explore that by looking at the professional development framework, which is developed by IRMA. It consists of 7 or 8 main chunks, and you can see what they are here. So you've got the pre-award parts, developing proposals, you've got the project support, so actually supporting researchers as they do the project, but also doing financial management and so on. Then there's the knowledge exchange part, so the working with businesses, making research have an impact. Research student administration is often part of research management administration, and then sort of more general things like policy and governance, so ethics, management information, reporting on how many projects you have, research income, and then of course audit and compliance, and then sort of standard things like organizing the research office, so how do you organize the support that you give, and then a kind of communication and training catch-all for everything. So looking at those 8 areas, one of the things we picked up from the survey, a little bit about that later on, is that in general, across the world, research managers and administrators all do the same sorts of things. So you can see here the blue column is respondents from the US, almost 1,000 of them, and the red column is respondents from countries other than the US. Are you, as an individual, involved in proposal development? Those first pair of columns, and you can see that it's roughly 90% of research managers and administrators are involved in that in some way. Similarly for project support, all the way across, the bar heights are very similar, apart from for research students. In general, research students is lower. Quite often there are a separate administrative support structures for looking after research students. Sometimes it's part of a research manager administrator remit, quite often it's a graduate school sort of approach. But you can see there across the world things are broadly similar. Looking at those 8 areas, this graph shows that for operational staff here, or more senior managerial staff here, or research management administration leaders, so heads of office, heads of function, how many of those roles do they undertake? And looking at this chunk down here, so for operational staff, those more junior research managers and administrators, about 40% of them cover 6 or more of those areas, and you can see that in general the coverage goes up as you would expect. As you're leading an area, you have other people working for you, and so you are covering more areas. But it's a very varied job, is what to take away from this slide. So RAP, my favorite acronym, Research Administration as a Profession. That's what I'm going to talk about for the major chunk of the talk now. It is also apparently Norwegian slang for burp, which we didn't know when we picked the acronym, but it's quite nice. So background, really, it kicked off in 2015. Stephanie and I sort of got together and said, well, what are research managers, what are research administrators, what do we do? Wouldn't it be great if we could run a survey to find out? Cura, the largest research management administration association in the world, they're based in the US. They have about 7,000 or 8,000 members. They actually fund some research into research management administration. So we applied for some funding to run this survey, picked up this advisory group of luminaries from around the world and started developing a questionnaire. Questionnaire had 3 main sections. What is it that you do as a research manager? What skills do you need? And then demographic information. So, how old are you? What sex are you? Those sorts of things. Looking at a bit more detail about those questions. So the sort of things we asked about in section A were what level do you work at? So you've seen that already, operational, managerial, or leadership. And so we can pull out the differences between people working at different levels, which is very useful if you're someone at an operational level and you want to move into a more senior managerial level. What skills are you perhaps missing, and what skills might want to develop? That was one of the original thoughts behind doing the survey in the first place. So what sort of employment do you have? Are you full-time? Are you part-time? Are you permanent or fixed term? What areas? We've looked at that. Do you work centrally or in a department? What sort of institution do you work in? Is it public or private, research intensive or not? How many jobs have you had? What level did you enter the profession? Did you enter it at a senior level? And why did you enter? And indeed, why have you stayed as a research manager administrator? In section B, we looked at those skills that I talked about. So here there's a whole set of hard skills, if you like, technical skills. So funding opportunities, things which are research management administration specific. I'm not going to read down them all, but you get the idea. So research impact, looking after research students, financial monitoring. So research management administration specific skills. A whole load more to cover those 7 or 8 areas that I talked about. So those are sort of those technical skills. We also asked about generic skills like communication, like team working, like cultural and diversity skills, like taking initiative, like mentoring and coaching. And we also asked, where did you learn those skills? Was it before you started or when you were a research manager doing professional development, if you like? Then, as I said, there was section C. What sort of level of education do you have? Do you have a doctorate or a master's? Do you have a specific accreditation in research management administration? Are you a member of professional associations? Where do you work? And say how old and what sex are you? So yeah, it was surprising that anybody answered the questionnaire at all, because it was quite a large questionnaire, a total of 222 data points altogether. So we think a lot of interesting data from there. We'll see over the next 10 minutes or so. So as I say, we got 2,691 responses, and you can see from the various associations here roughly where they are from. So there was, let's say, 241 from Canada, from the Canadian Association. Unfortunately, this was done in 2016, this first survey, none from India, but there is good news coming, don't worry. Just a bit of a breakdown there. So mainly from the US, quite a lot from the UK, rest of Europe, and so on. This is quite a complicated slide. So this is an example of the sort of information you can get from the soft skills. So we asked, how important are proposal preparation skills in your current job? And this pink area is very important. Is it hugely important for you to have proposal preparation skills? There's quite a large proportion of people say yes, but when you compare that with a softer skill like general communication skills, and you can see the scales are about the same here, then that's twice as many for whom it's important in their role. They have to have a high level of skills, so that softer skill is more important than this technical skill, which is perhaps interesting depending on what sort of skills you feel you need to develop. This is the biggest takeaway slide from that first survey, which are, here we have the hard skills, and here, which is all of those technical skills that I outlined, and here the soft skills, all of those skills, so communication, collaboration, and so on. Taking the average of those, if you're operational or managerial or leader on these hard skills, then it becomes more important as those skills develop, which is perhaps counterintuitive. You might have thought that as you become a leader, it's less important to have those technical skills because you have staff doing it for you, but you also do need to have an understanding of those technical skills in order to direct those staff. However, when you look at the soft skills, then this extremely important comes in. So those soft skills are much more important than those hard technical skills. So worth bearing in mind. Okay, if you want to find out more about the RAP1 survey, all the information is available via the INORMS website. You can find it quite easily, or just Google search for INORMS RAP, don't forget the 3 A's, and you can access all the data sets and do any analyses that you might wish to do yourself, or indeed you may not want to do that and you might want someone else to do it for you, and I'll come on to that. So after the huge success of the 2016 survey, INORMS decided to adopt the RAP survey, if you like. INORMS is the Association of Research Management Administration Associations, so that sort of umbrella organization, if you like, and they gave us the remit, more or less the same team, to run a follow-on survey, which we did. We called it RAP2, not very original, but you get the idea. And we involved all of these associations, and you can see we got some help from Savita for distributing the questionnaire to India Alliance members, but you can see there's a whole host of people involved in that. As I say, more or less the same team. The second survey was more or less the same as the first survey, so we asked the same questions about your role. We didn't ask about skills and competencies again because that was a very large section, took a long time to fill in, and we didn't feel that that would probably change too much. We asked the same demographic questions, more or less the same, but we added a new section on research impact this time, and the idea is that this will become longitudinal data collection, and we'll run it perhaps every 2 or 3 years or so, and look at the differences over time, and have this guest section. So this guest section this time for the 2019 survey was on research impact. So data from the 2019 survey, it's still draft because although it's at the time of recording 2020 and by the time you read this 2021, there have been a lot of data cleansing and analysis to do, and yeah, we've had COVID. That's kind of slowed things down a bit. That's my excuse and I'm sticking to it, but we will get there. So anyway, what you see is draft data. Just to give you a quick idea, so this time we had 4,325 responses, so even more than the first one, which we were really happy about. Here you can see by association what percentage of the people responded, and you can see India Alliance did really well, over 30%. That's one of the highest return rates. Of course, a smallish membership at that time, but nonetheless very impressive. So here we have information about, again, the sort of operational managerial leader, and here we can see that roughly 80% of operational and managerial staff in the first survey were female, and this dropped to about 72% for leadership. Very unfortunate. That's that glass ceiling effect again, if you like, with males seeming to be promoted more often than females. You can see that the data, this is the RAP2 data, so from 3 years later, is more or less the same. Perhaps it's gone even worse on the managerial side there. So we have a real female-dominated profession, but a glass ceiling, and that's something that we really need to address. Here, highest qualification, so yellow is doctorate, a master's and bachelor's, and in general, leaders are more highly qualified than managers, than operational staff. Again, a slight difference here. We have a slightly higher proportion of managerial staff with doctorates over that 3-year period. Again, draft information and yet to be tested for statistical significance, but you can still see that overall trend is the same. So perhaps one way of being promoted is to be more highly qualified. Looking at the US only, just to give you an idea that the data can be picked out in different ways, you can see that there's a much higher, if I flick back to the overall position here, and then the US position, fewer US research leaders have PhDs than the rest of the world, but more have masters, and that probably reflects the overall US educational system, with masters being a sort of prominent degree required for professional roles. there's also perhaps a link with a number of other countries where it being quite common for researchers to move into research administration roles, research management administration roles, and so quite often researchers will have a PhD. So again, there's some very interesting stories to be told about how people become research managers, administrators, and what they do when they get there. If only we had more time to discuss it. Looking at some results from India, and bear in mind that these are just 34 responses, so those percentages aren't huge in terms of being able to draw statistical significance. But you can see that overall, so I've picked out India. This is the RAP2 data, of course. India, the UK, and in green the US, and you can see just the proportion of responses from leaders, managers, and operational staff. So so far fewer operational level staff from India responding than managerial staff. So we can't therefore compare all the other things too much, but I will of course now do that because it's interesting to at least show you some data. Here we have what proportion of respondents were on permanent contracts or on fixed term positions, and you can see it's a much higher proportion of fixed term positions in India, probably because it's a relatively new profession and institutions haven't decided that this is a core role that they must invest in. They're kind of trying it out. So, and you can see that as other countries develop research management and administration support. Just an idea from the sort of the new area, if you like. So we asked here about your qualifications. Is your background, your PhD or your master's, in an area that you support? So do you have a biomedical background working to support biomedical researchers? So the Indian responses were a much higher yes, or yes, some, compared with the UK and the US, where there were quite a quarter didn't have any background in that area at all in terms of their academic background. This graph here is it important that you have that? And so again, a lot of Indian responses say yes, it is important, but a lot of US and UK responses say actually no, it's not important, because what I provide is research administration support rather than research support. I'm not supporting the researcher doing the research, I'm supporting them, enabling them to do the research. And here you see the proportion with doctorates, so and masters. So again, a very high proportion of Indian research managers and administrators with doctorates. So it tells me that they're more likely to have been researchers who have moved from research to research management administration and still working very closely with the researchers. That's kind of what that picture tells me. So it's at the moment a slightly different profession in India than it perhaps is in the US and the UK overall. How many jobs have you had? Again, it's a mixed picture, but this is my favorite here. It's complicated. So yes, a lot of complicated positions in India in terms of, yeah, I'm not quite sure how I got here. Did I have a research management administration position before or not? And some stories to be told and understood there. We have this proportion of male and female that I talked about. You can see a higher proportion of males in India than females doing research management administration compared with the international average, but still female dominated. And again, that might have something to do with the research background. Do you look after research impacts? This is a new area. Again, there's a lot of people who do not know about research impact and how it's supported in the ecosystem, but that's across the world. So it's a newish policy area, I think. So I'm just about out of time. What has RAP been used for? Well, as I say, we're collecting longitudinal data. There's a EU-funded project looking at what research managers and administrators do and how do we identify and support those undergraduate people who might want to become research managers and administrators. So how do we advocate for the profession? You can check out that there. There's been some work done by an Italian consortium and a Portuguese consortium trying to put together an association in their countries and using that information from RAP to help them to do that. It's been disseminated in a whole load of different countries. The work's been cited, and as I say, it's also informing association provision. So particularly that impact area that I just mentioned there, is that something that research managers administrators are looking for support on? And if so, their local research management administration organization association might wish to do that. And we have also just been awarded some additional funding from Inaugural for a RAP-A project, so analysis, so providing much more of the sort of analyses I've just shown you there, and more kind of infographic style, so hopefully easier to understand. If you are looking for conclusions, then what I would say is research management administration is a profession, but it varies country by country. There are some bullet points there, so you can get certification, but those generic skills, that's the big takeaway from me. If you, as I say, if you want to analyze the data, it's there on Figshare. If you want to read all about it, then there are various references here. And I think I'm out of time, so I will leave it to any potential questions. So thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Simon, for presenting the RAP and the RAP2 surveys. It's clearly been a very big undertaking to run both the surveys, and it's very exciting to think that this might be a longitudinal survey and that you might be able to track across time how these trends change. So on that note, Simon, what I'd request is for all our panelists to join us on stage, and we will just open up the conversation. Great. So we have everybody here. So my first question, actually, Vasan, is to you. You've had a long time working as a research leader in the industry context, you know, from your experience over there, what do you think? I mean, what is the kind of research management support that is needed in that context? And do you think that might be different to what happens in basic research, for example, or research that's in primarily academic institutions?
Thank you. At the outset, I want to thank the panelists for an excellent talk about how research management is practiced within India and as well as abroad. So thank you for that and setting the stage. So back to your question, Savita. So I was a hardcore bench researcher. At some point in my career, I decided I really found a lot of excitement and strength in working with people. So that mindset to really collaborate, work with people is what set me out into this journey of program management, wherein it really diversified the opportunities all the way from an ideation, looking for opportunities, building partnerships, making it happen, drawing out the plan, talking about budget, the IP, the legal aspects, dealing with different kinds of people, different kinds of stakeholders in this journey, and really working towards delivering. It could be a product, it could be a vaccine, or it could be a drug. So what it entailed, or the opportunity, was really widespread, with an ability to really learn a lot of things. You don't have to be good at everything, but as long as you can connect with people and be an enabler. That's why yesterday in yesterday's session, I said research management is more of an enabling role, where you really bring in the best minds, people with diverse skill set onto the table and make things happen, connect the dots. So I don't see much of difference between what happens in the industry versus what happens in academia. The end goal could be different. There it's more product oriented, whereas here it could be something kind of output from a research. The only difference I could draw is in terms of the time sensitivity and the budgets. The decision tree in an industry is very stringent. A lot of time gets spent in terms of planning as why are we embarking on a given project? What are the odds of success? Is there anything we can do to kill a project early on? Because the more a project survives, you're spending a lot of money, and the chance of it failing a later stage costs a bomb. So the decision, it's all about asking this question: do we even have a an iota of doubt that this is not going to work? Should we kill it? Why should this program proceed? Whereas in the academic setting, it's more about an idea. How do you nurture it? How do you sustain it? How do you keep going? So that are the only differences I can think about. Otherwise, the skill sets and the nuances of what is needed are same in both industry as well as academia.
Thank you very much, Vasan, for your response. Makiko, I have a question for you. You referred to academia industry partnerships and the role of research managers in Japan. Could you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yes, thank you. URA in Japanese university have so many roles in university industry collaboration, but essentially it is very similar to Dr. Jamil's point of research cycle and Dr. Shahid's point of funding divide. And actually, and the outside pressure of university, research competitive fund from government is essential need of university industry collaboration nowadays. So talking about the role in university industry collaboration, most of all the part of research dynamics, university URA has needs. And within my 15 years practitioner experience, I think about the principal investigators' roles and university research managers' roles. If the researcher is a novelist, I think URA is like an editor. Or if a researcher is a soccer player, I think URA is like a coach or manager of a professional soccer team. I think it's a kind of example to think about the standpoint of PI and URA.
Thank you so much, Maki. So another question for you, Maki, which is you showed there's been the steady increase in the number of URAs in Japan over the last decade. What do you think is the motivation for that?
Motivation, it is very diversified. So I like to answer from two dimensions, from university level and individual level. Firstly, university level, one of the biggest reasons next second program I mentioned before. The program is 10 years employment budget for awarded universities. Because of that, about 300 or more URAs are hired under the program, but it is time limited. That is the university level. And individual level motivation, in my presentation, the major population of current Japanese URAs are 40s and under 40s. Maybe it is younger compared to UK or USA. And then they have, one half of them have PhD and academic career in like a PhD or postdoc. They want to contribute to promote science itself. And on the contrary, the other group, over 50s, most of them are engaged in URA with the experience of industry. They want to engage their second career in academia and feel happy to touching cutting edge science. So talking from office management, we need to think the diversified member with the expertise. Yeah, that is a general answer for you.
Thank you, Maki. I think, Simon, so then there seem to be some parallels between Japan and India in the demographics. Of course, the India subset who answered the survey is still, it's a very small number, but looks like even in Japan, it's an attractive proposition for individuals from research backgrounds to go into research management. Shaid, maybe I'll just ask you to comment a little bit on this because you have worked with research managers across the country, both India line staff and others. What is your view on individuals from scientific backgrounds kind of taking up research management roles?
Well, I think it's a very good career option for people who don't want to deal with the daily rigors of being in a lab, struggling for funding. And, you know, it's not just maybe in India that we are seeing people with PhDs getting into research management. Some of the best research managers that you'll find at NIH, for example, all come from PhD backgrounds. I mean, they come from really hardcore research backgrounds who have moved into research management. But there's one, I feel, very important difference between people who work at funding agencies in India versus people who work in funding agencies in US. And I'm taking the example of US primarily because of my of sitting on NIH panels and having grants from NIH. That the kind of position papers that are written by people who manage research at NIH is sadly missing from our research management ecosystem. And if there is one thing that possibly should be strengthened in India across the board at funding agencies, is to give people who manage research enough time to read scientific literature and be up on what's happening in the world of science. They get so bogged down with the daily administration that at some point they forget that they have PhDs. I mean, they were bench scientists, and it's really expected of them to also put together good position papers on emerging areas of research, and that's how funding agencies themselves will evolve. Otherwise, that brings in stagnation. So that's something I would say that all funding agencies, and I would say India Alliance included, should make sure that people have enough time to read, and people who are in those positions should have the willingness to do that.
Thank you. Simon, we'll come back to the survey. So first, you presented a lot of sort of common results from across the different geographies. And I think already from Makiko's talk, we've heard of some distinctions between different geographies. I was wondering if you could share some more insights of sort of country-specific trends, which are different from the global trends.
Sure, yes. How much time do we have? Okay, so I guess I really liked Maki's analogy about soccer, about football, and about the players and the managers. And I'm now going to perhaps disagree a little bit with Shahid, although at the same time agree with him as well. So quite often the RAP data shows that in countries where research management is new, there are a higher proportion of males than more generally. And that's probably because there are a higher proportion of researchers in those countries who are males, and a higher proportion of the research managers used to be researchers. But if you go to somewhere like the US, then if you remember that graph I showed, that there were a lower proportion of research managers and administrators with PhDs than in other parts of the world, because rather than it being only a job for researchers who want to do something else, it's also a job for people from very much diverse backgrounds. And I think that's the same for soccer coaches. Quite often there are people who have been very prolific and well-known soccer players, but often not. They come from different backgrounds, and it's even broader for research management more generally. People can come from all sorts of different backgrounds, and if you're thinking about those kind of top-level leadership positions, and again, I agree with Shahid, if you're talking about research managers who are working perhaps not only in universities but also in policymakers and in particular in funders, then those are the ones who do tend to have that scientific background, because otherwise they don't have I suppose that kudos to be able to work with the top level researchers and hand out the money. So I think that's where it is quite important. But I think more generally for research management administration, if you're thinking about someone working in a research office in a university, then the data has showed that where the profession is, or has been around longer, let's put it that way, that you don't necessarily need to have a research background which is related to the research that you're supporting. You just need to have the ability to understand it. And so I think there's a whole spectrum. So I'm not sure if I've answered the question other than to say that the answer to any research management administration that you get asked ever, and you'll know this, Savita, is it depends.
Yes, that's right.
So let me clarify, Simon, that I was only talking about funding agencies.
Okay.
I was not talking about institutions.
But I think there is an overlap there, and I think for some positions in institutions, if you are a pro vice chancellor for research, if you like, then quite often, almost always in the UK, you'll have that research background, and almost always in the US that you will. But it isn't necessarily necessary, and there are some institutions around the world where even a pro vice chancellor who would consider themselves a research manager administrator doesn't necessarily come from a research background. And it goes back to something else that Maki was saying. They could have come from an industry background. So it's just such an exciting area that we work in, because people can have all sorts of different backgrounds. So I agree.
Yeah, okay. And Simon, the other question I had was obviously research management as a profession, well, as a practice, let's put it that way. There are certain common roles, certain common features all across the world. There are certain things which are country specific. So in sort of what you've seen with the survey and what you've seen working across with, different kinds of research management associations, what would your advice for India be? I mean, what are the aspects that we could perhaps learn from the rest of the world, and what do you think might be areas that we need to develop capacity exclusively, uniquely from the Indian context?
Okay, so just a small question. So yeah, I think actually what we've heard, I was going to say this morning, but today, sorry, has been the answer to that question. So we have sort of openness and collaboration as the basis for the way in which research is done, and is also and should also be the basis for which research management administration is done, because quite often you might be the only person with this particular research administration expertise in your institution, maybe bioethics, for example. And so the only way that you can learn more about good practice in that area is by speaking to other research managers and administrators who do a similar role in other institutions. So certainly our profession, if I can call it that, community of practice might be a better phrase, is very much based on sharing good practice. And I think you'll find that all the groups and associations around the world are based on that sharing good practice. I think Maki said that when she said it was, I think, 2008 when she went to the Inaugural conference, and she very much felt welcomed because people wanted to learn from her and share their experience, because at some point these US institutions are going to want to do research with a Japanese institution, and if they're research managers and administrators know each other, then that's going to make the whole process smoother, if you like. So that sort of openness, willing to share, collaboration, developing a community of practice, absolutely. Whether you should then become an association or not, interesting question. My quick answer is yes, but it may not be correct for some internal reason in India. For example, there isn't an association in Austria because there is a political and structural difference in the constitution between having a non-formal association and an association. Once you become an association, you become a union. And so that then becomes something which is quite difficult in a university environment, because it means that you have to be recognized by your institution as a group of staff which have voting members on decisions made and so on, and that wasn't really the direction they wanted to go on. So I don't know enough about the Indian constitution as to whether that's an issue or not, but whatever way you go in terms of formalizing it, make sure that you're open, as inclusive as you can be. And what you need to do is have people who are willing to volunteer their time. Crucially, I would say, if you remember the graph I showed about the growth of IRMA, there was a peak where we decided that we had enough members that we could afford to employ someone to tell the world about research management administration, the UK world, in order to get more members. And so it was that if we create the association, then they will come, and that worked. So certainly India is large enough for that. So I think you probably have to take that leap of faith, which is, yes, we're going to do this. We've shown that it works with the India Alliance for the, if I can say, a small number compared with the total number of research managers and administrators you have in India. Let's create something, create this association, but create the association which is what the people in the association want, the community of practice, rather than something that's top down. So it has to be bottom up. But it has to be supported top down. And again, we heard that right at the very start of today. You need to have that recognition from the top level of the institutions. And the other important thing that was mentioned was having those sort of career paths, if you like. And again, that's something, again, I think I mentioned in my talk about Italy and Portugal, where it's very much, to be an administrator in a university, it's very much part of a framework. And if a senior research administrator position doesn't exist in that framework, then you can't be it. So you have to show that this is a professional pathway so that it fits in. Otherwise, you just come up with problems all the time. That was quite a long answer, but
yes. Well, I think maybe to summarize it and sort of bring it back to the Indian context, just sort of have to say that we're taking our very early steps in sort of building the community. And of course, we look at other countries, we look at other contexts to see how this might work. But at the end of it, we'll have to do things which work in the Indian context as well. So thank you very much for that. So Vasan, maybe I'll just ask you to say some closing remarks about where do you think the IRMI initiative is going to go in the next couple of years? What is the India Alliance view on that?
Yes, as we heard in the last couple of hours, we heard from Vijay, who was one of the early, architects of India Alliance, and how the whole thing started. We have Shahid here. We heard from the Secretary of DBT in terms of the entire thought process and the need in the society or need in the ecosystem to have research management as a practice. And that appreciation and the need has become really prominent, I would say, in the last couple of years, which led to the pilot study, which you and Shahid have shared as a publication, which is available for anyone to go through, and then led to the initiation of IRMI. As you could see from the level of participation today, you could see that we really had a good participation, engagement, as well as inputs from our international speakers. Clearly, IRMI is here to stay. All right, we are just in the early years, 1 year over. Second year, we are going through the application process of evaluating the applications. So I clearly see that we will expand and we will build big on IRMI and make it happen more often. And again, really look at or reach out to institutional heads to support. As Vijay also articulated, it's very important that we as a funding agency can only provide a platform and bring in some of the key speakers and contacts from outside to see how others have done. We may have to give a local flavor of how we want to adapt and expand. But institutions have a big role to play in terms of adopting this, playing a proactive role in terms of enabling, and really working closely with the best of the research managers we have in this conference to clearly develop a career path for them and get them integrated into the mainstay, into the institutional network. So I clearly see that IRMI is going to play an impactful role. More so now with the pandemic, there is a realization that science cannot be done in silos. It has to be collaboration. Who else better than a research management professional to be an enabler and anchor to bring in the best minds together to solve big problems plaguing the society. So I'm very, very excited about this, and thanks for all the people who have done the early work of putting in the building blocks, right? And also all my colleagues and you, Savita, in terms of arranging this conference. I think it's really a fantastic platform and opportunity to hear people out and discuss and come out with some recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vasan. And on that note, I just thank all the panelists for your time, your input, your views. And with that, we'll bring this session to a close. There is a little feedback form for the session that will be sent out. So we request all our viewers to fill out that feedback form. You can share your views in with that through that form. And for all of our viewers, we look forward to seeing you tomorrow when we start hearing from our Indian research managers. And we'll also have panel discussions. We'll have networking sessions in the evening, which will be more informal discussions. All the links are there in the digital brochure that has been shared with the participants. So stay tuned and look forward to seeing you tomorrow. And thanks once again. Sorry, Shahid, you have something to say?
Yeah, Savita, I just wanted to thank you and everyone else for this program. And it's really wonderful to be here, to be at essentially the first anniversary. And, you know, like Vasan said, it's going to be a 2-year-old program from here on. And I'll remind everyone that 2-year-olds are the most exciting people.
Yes.
They're just beginning to get curious, and they poke their fingers in every hole that they can see. So I hope that IRMI will continue to do that, continue to be curious and continue to explore. Thank you all.
Thank you so much, Shahid. Bye then, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Look forward to seeing you in the next couple of days. Thanks, Simon. Thanks, Maki, and thanks, Shai. Thanks, Savita. Have a wonderful evening. Thank you.
Thank you.